Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about healthy masculinity. And there's a reason why this is so important to me because I think the internal lives of men are so often neglected by our field, by our practice. And in fact, I would say that the one who neglects them the most is the man himself. The other disclaimer I want to make before we begin is I will be talking about masculinity, but really it's important that we separate out the idea of masculinity from men. But you'll find me falling back into the pattern of referring to a masculine idea, a masculine principle, a masculine characteristic in terms of men, because that's what the dominant culture sees for men. It sees in men is that kind of masculinity. But, and I will say this at the outset very clearly, for a healthy person, for a whole and healthy person, it is to embrace and to balance that masculine and feminine energy for all of us, whether you're a man, a woman, a non-binary person, or one who doesn't really fit any of the categories. So with that, let me go into the housekeeping items and then I'll get to our content. I am going to be running the June 10th through June 14th Finding You. I run one or two a year, and I'm sure to tell you about that because there are people that have shared with me that they're waiting to attend when I am running it. So June 10th through 14th, I'll be running the Finding You. If you're interested in that, and with all of our services, if you're looking for a private intensive, for a couple, for a family, if you want to learn about our support groups, which we have on the third Wednesday of each month for our alumni, May 20th is that offering. In addition, because we have recently partnered with Other Parents Like Me, we will also be starting on Other Parents Like Me Finding You specific program. That will be on Monday, on Saturday. That's going to be on Saturday, May 23rd at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So I'll be leading that first one, and I'll check in on that group from time to time. But this is going to be themed towards these podcasts, towards the work that I do, and towards the Finding You philosophy. So May 23rd, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. If you're interested about that, if you're looking for a coach, for a therapist that helps work in this attachment-based model, you can go to our website portal to ask us there, to inquire there, or you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're interested in attending a workshop with me, I'm excited to be back with my daughter Emma at the Omega Institute in July. That's July 12th through 17th this summer. It's a 5-day course. It's around $500. You have to get your own lodging. You can stay there at the Institute, or you can get an Airbnb somewhere nearby. But it's a very inexpensive program. It fits somewhere between lecturing and the intensives. It's a larger group, so it's not a deep dive into your work, but it definitely is an experience with the group to help you explore the parts of yourself that you have been told to get rid of, that you've been told to repress. So July 12th through 17th, the Audacity to Be You workshop in Omega. Go to eomega.org. In addition, my daughter and I will be traveling to North Carolina at the Art of Living Retreat Center. Be running that same workshop, same parameters, same cost, same situation, September 27th through October 7th. I'm looking so forward to both of those. We ran one last year and thoroughly enjoyed it. With that, let's get into tonight's content. As I said at the outset, I want to separate the idea of the masculine and being a man, because those are not synonymous. When we talk about masculine, we're talking about a certain style, a certain way of being that we often identify with men, but really it is this energy that anybody, including women, can embrace and can embody. In fact, as you all know very well, oftentimes women get punished for showing up like men get rewarded for. So if a woman is assertive, she can be punished for it, whereas a man would be applauded for that same thing. So this is just about, I think tonight, understanding what it means to have healthy masculinity. One of the things that I've noticed in my work is that we have a pretty good idea of what toxic masculinity is, and we have a pretty good idea of what healthy femininity is, but we don't hear much talk about toxic femininity, nor do we hear much talk about healthy masculinity. In fact, oftentimes when I hear people talk about a healthy masculine trait or attribute, they're actually describing the feminine. So what this suggests, again, is this under appreciation for the plight of the masculine, of the man in our community, and how there really is no overt, conscious attention to what it means to be a healthy masculine, whether it be in a female or in a male. So when talking about healthy masculinity, we must, of course, discuss the lives of men. A simple way to understand the plight of men in today's age is to consider a woman with all of her challenges, all of her dilemmas, all of her grief, everything she's up against, and then imagine cutting her off from her community, from her sources of support. I think one of the most tragic aspects in men's lives in today's world is this cutoff, this fact that men are supposed to be independent, not vulnerable, not weak. I thought about this very, very clearly in preparation for tonight's broadcast when I think about the fact that part of the reason I want to talk about this is because I have talked to men over the course of my career, and they have talked about their aversion to psychotherapy, right? I make a pretty big push or plug for doing your own work. And in my experience, that can often best be done in the presence of an empathic and capable therapist. But having said that, I hear so many men talk about how it comes for them with a special kind of stigma where it doesn't with the feminine or with the female. Females are encouraged and supported by their community. They have lots of contact with other people they can go to for support. And to go to therapy for a woman is considered by many women to be an important part of gathering that support. But men or masculine on the other side is often cut off from this source because we don't understand the unique perspective of what a man is indoctrinated into in our society. So if you think about a woman and you think about all the challenges she has, one way to think about men is just imagining that same person with very little to no support. And then you have a glimpse at what it means to understand the plight of men. And I want to say this very clearly. I think what I've noticed in my work with families and couples and men is that they are oftentimes attacked, criticized, and diminished by those in the therapy world because their natural instinct is to cover up, to wall off, to create this really formidable defense against that kind of support. And I'll talk about this a little bit later tonight, but over and over and over again, I have the experience of welcoming men into, for example, a family intensive or a couples intensive. And it's one of the most common experiences I have that men would tell me after being in that environment for a couple of days, that if they knew it was going to be this positive for them, this empowering for them, they would have signed up a long time ago. So I asked them, what are you expecting when you come to therapy? And most men tell me they expect to come to therapy to be criticized, to be shown how flawed, how broken they are. So I think it would be really easy for all of us to understand why men would be so averse to psychotherapy when the expectation is that they're going to receive criticism. They're going to have the problem pinned on them. One of the books that I'm referring to today that I take a lot of my material from is, again, one of James Hollis's books. This one is called Under Saturn's Shadow, and it is about the plight of the masculine or the plight of men. And in there he writes, surely the greatest tragedy for men is that their fear alienates them from their own anima. That's the feminine inside of them, right? In men, we call the female aspect of men, we call it the anima. And in women, we call the masculine aspect of masculinity, we call that the animus. So surely the greatest tragedy for men is that their fear alienates them from their own anima. The principle of relatedness, feeling and connection to the life force. This alienation from self obliges alienation from other men as well. Often, men's only connection with each other comes through superficial talk about outer events, such as sports and politics. I'm always shocked at the number of text chains that my wife has in a given day with friends for support when compared to my own. Most of mine are around business or logistics or planning, dealing with clients, but I don't have that same list of running text chains in my phone as evidence with the kind of connection and support that I'm getting from people. In his book, Under Saturn's Shadow, James Hollis identifies 8 secrets that men carry within, and I'm going to touch upon a couple of them with some depth. The first one that he lists is men's lives are governed by as much by restrictive role expectations as the lives of women. This might not be a popular take, what I'm about to say, but it is, in my experience, so true. That it will never work to alienate and pathologize men to get them into therapy. So we can talk about the harm that men do. We can talk about men as active participants in the patriarchy, which is real. But those attacks and those critiques aren't necessarily the kind of love and welcoming and invitation that men are going to experience. They expect, like I said earlier, from my experience with working with men, they expect to be criticized. They expect to be told that they're doing it wrong. I can't even tell you how many men I've worked with in my career where so much of my work is to empower them, to know themselves, to know the truth, their inner truth, with a certain kind of confidence that then they can stand toe-to-toe with their wives or their partners in the emotional field and have an assertive conversation where they advocate for themselves. They feel so small and overmatched in discussions with others when it comes to emotions, because men are taught to suppress emotions, that to be emotional is to be weak. So we can all agree on the damage that the patriarchy does. We can all agree that perhaps the greatest threat to women is men. There's no doubt about that. But that is more evidence to support this idea that men need as much of this healing work in a non-judgmental, empathic space as do women. And it might even be argued that they know more. James Hollis says, hence the first of the great secrets to be openly acknowledged is that men's lives are as much governed by role expectations as are the lives of women. And the corollary is that those roles do not support, confirm, or resonate to the needs of men's souls. So like I've said, yes, I absolutely think that there is a patriarchal power structure in our time, in most of history, where women get treated as second-class citizens at best, sometimes even objects. But I want to go farther and say that these roles, these expectations, these restrictive allowances for men do as much harm to them as they do to women. We often talk about the idea that we see in our prison system in America that minorities and people of color are disproportionately represented in the prison system. That's really clear to us. But you know what's even more profound and even a bigger overrepresentation is that even though somewhere around 51% of our population are women and 49% are men, and it's close to 50-50, even though those are the numbers of the spread, 93% of prisoners in the American prison system are men. So while we can argue that men are benefiting from the patriarchy in kind of a structural sense, when we look at cases individually, we see that men in many ways are suffering under role expectations and the patriarchy as women are. The second secret that Hollis talks about is that men's lives are essentially governed by fear. To me, this is the one that really hits close to home, the one that I want to emphasize this evening. It took me the great majority of my life to realize how scared, how anxious I was. And the reason that fact was unknown to me was because I had learned to camouflage my anxiety according to role expectations, the same way that most men do. So what anxiety looks like in a man often is it looks like anger, frustration, control, intimidation, aggression. And of course, we see how harmful those are to the individual man and to the women and the children and the people in his life. I wrote just last week, for many men, and of course for some others, anxiety often manifests as anger, frustration, intensity, and control and intimidations. James Hollis says, men's lives are essentially governed by fear. Because men cannot undo what fragile strength they have assembled, they can scarcely admit to themselves or to others how much fear influences them. See, they're not even allowed to feel fear. A woman, or a feminine presentation, more accurately said, a feminine presentation of anxiety is more classic. You can discern it quite easily. Hand wringing, nervousness, worry, tears, shaking, right? That's an obvious feminine presentation of anxiety, which women in our culture are more apt to display, to demonstrate. They're not punished for it. It's not seen on them as something that is putrid, but rather just a condition of their sensitivity. So men learn to hide it first from themselves and then from everybody else. It becomes wonderfully camouflaged under anger. And like I said, if fear, specifically unowned, free-floating anxiety that isn't owned by the person, the parent, if that anxiety is, as I often suggest, is internalized by the child as something is wrong with me, then you've got to believe that the masculine presentation of anxiety, intensity, anger, frustration, impatience, and so forth, is also creating that same kind of damage to children, maybe even more overtly. Hollis goes on to say, the healing of a man will require that he cease feeling shamed by his fear. I've always admired the freedom of women to acknowledge their fears, to share them, and thereby reap the support of others. For a man to so acknowledge the place of fear in his life is to risk feeling unmanly and to expect shaming by others, so his isolation deepens. Some of the other things that Hollis describes as his 8 secrets that men carry include these. The power of the feminine is immense in the psychic economy of women. My experience socially, I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, so you can imagine what my culture looks like around here. But very often, men in the emotional and the family realm feel like they are constantly one down. One of the reasons why men escape into work so much, and again, this can go to men and women. I'm not going to keep qualifying that. I'm going to talk in kind of generalities and stereotypes, because there's a large portion of truth that fall within those stereotypes. The reason that men are often tempted to spend more time at work, less time at home, is because at work it makes sense. At work, they feel competent. They feel confident. They know what the task is, and nothing in their bodies necessarily prevents them from accomplishing those tasks. So they get praise, they get attention, they get appreciation. But because their emotional life is so closed down and so small, when they come home and talk to their spouses and their children, which is a much less efficient, much less clear path than the one at work, they feel outmatched. They feel less than. And again, those feelings of inadequacy, of insecurity, of overwhelm, aren't going to manifest themselves very often in terms of tears, which the family members and the spouses could easily respond to, right? But instead, those feelings of anger and frustration and intensity that the man displays are going to push away the very people that he hopes to support him. Asking someone to take off their armor, and the moment they are hiding behind it, is to attack the wound. As Jamie Gill stated, it is important to recognize that the defense, this wall, is doing important psychological work. or the energy required to maintain it wouldn't make any sense. Ripping away defenses does not improve the situation. Taking them away before the person is able to tolerate what the defenses mask leaves the person worse off than before. At least before, with the defense, he or she could function. Now he or she is incapable. And here's the line I love so much. Both cruel people and inadequate therapists are famous for a desire to destroy defenses without considering the consequences. So if you're a spouse or you have a man in your life and you want him to open up, to take this descent into himself that you have been willing to take and might have even been on the path for a long time, if you want to invite him into that descent with you, I think the first task is to understand that according to his training, that descent inward is nonsense, is worthless, is unmanly, makes him broken and unlovable. We must, if we are to contribute to the healing of men and the masculine, develop compassion for men and their plight. But the man's defense is it's aimed in part at alienating them from the very support and the connection that they crave. I am not diminishing the harm that men do. But what I am suggesting is before a man harms somebody else, he has been harmed. And without the resources or the emotional depth and richness that therapy and the feminine can offer him, he's left to his own devices. Anger, rage, violence, aggression. Some of the other secrets. Men collude in conspiracy of silence whose aim is to suppress their emotional truth. Staying quiet, not complaining for men is to be a man, is to be manly. Because men must leave their mother and transcend the mother complex, stop being a boy, wounding is necessary. One of the stories that I'm going to refer to tonight and some of the information I'm going to take from is Robert Bly's book, Iron John, which is based on an ancient myth or story. There was in this one kingdom a red hairy man that lived at the bottom of a lake. And in these myths, we can understand that the lake or that body of water represent the unconscious. And it is said that many people disappear when they go into this region of the kingdom, lost and taken captive by the hairy red man. So eventually the king and his court go out and they capture this red hairy man and they lock him in a cage on the grounds of the castle. And one day when the prince is playing with his favorite toy falls and rolls into the cage where the red hairy man is kept. So the boy asks for his toy back. And the red hairy man explains to the boy, I will give you your toy back, but you have to let me out of this cage. So the young prince agrees to this arrangement. Then the red hairy man explains that the key that will unlock the cage is hidden beneath his mother's pillow. And you can start to see the symbol of where the key is. The pillow of the mother represents the dreams that the mother has for the boy, of who this boy should become. And the red hairy man explains to the young prince, he says, you're going to have to go and find the key under your mother's pillow and steal it. He warns the boy, he says, your mother will not give it to you if you ask for it. You must steal it. So the boy goes and finds his mother's pillow, lifts it up and grabs the key and goes back down to the courtyard and opens the cage. And the red hairy man throws the boy on his shoulder and carries him into the woods to teach him how to be a man. So in order to grow up, one Buddhist teacher is famous for saying, in order to grow up, we have to learn to kill our parents. Another one once said, we actually have to learn to kill everybody. Nobody's going to give it to you. You have to steal it. That is one of the masculine principles. And the red hairy man represents this masculinity that everybody is so afraid of. Number 6, the sixth secret. Men's lives are violent because their souls have been violated. Again, when I meet with men who have had significant experiences with infidelity, I explain to them, before you betrayed your partner, you were betrayed by you and by others. Happy and healed people don't act out such betrayals on other people. They're too sensitive and too connected. But you've been so disconnected from your real self, from your authentic self for so long that you have no connection to others. It doesn't mean that we should tolerate men's violence. It means that we could have some compassion for this plight that men live in our society. Number 7, every man carries a deep longing for his father and for his tribal fathers. And in our society, that is fairly limited, right? I would argue, and most people do in the literature, that ours is a society that has lost its rights, its initiations, its ceremony, its spiritual self. In other primitive societies, at a certain age, the young boys, to become men are often set out on a difficult journey, a difficult task, often that includes some kind of wounding or some kind of threat, some kind of quest. And this ritual is something that the entire village or the entire community supports. It's this moment when the boy is to become a man. But we don't have much of that in our society. And because we call what we think is healthy masculinity is actually healthy femininity, we also don't reward men and boys and women, for that matter, when they embrace the masculine, right? The ability to discern, the courage to go out there, to face dragons, the ability to do certain things that is associated with that masculine energy. If men are to heal, they must activate within what they did not receive without. I think one of the things that I have most compassion for in my work with individuals is that so many of the people that I work with are cycle breakers, right? They have decided, oftentimes triggered by watching their children suffer, but there are other reasons why they come to therapy. They have decided that they're going to try to give the people in their lives something that they were not offered as a child and are still not offered. And I find that with men and women, that they're trying to support their children in ways that they were never supported. And that leaves them in an especially precarious situation, really empty and in clinging for something to feed them. So men have to learn to develop and cultivate and explore a part of themselves that was not modeled, that was not given to them. If we are to contribute to the healing of men and the masculine, we must develop compassion for their plight. But remember that every masculine, so many of the men in our society have cut themselves off from support as a part of what they think it means to be a man. The cost of these secrets, Hollis says, is that men's lives are as much governed by the expectations of women's, and that men are secretly ruled by fear. It's rather easy to discern the sufferings of individual men and the pathology of our society. American men die on the average years before women. They are 4 times more likely to be substance abusers and also 4 times more likely to take their own lives. They're 11 times more likely to spend time in jail. And these statistics do not even begin to plumb the depths of male rage, male sadness, and male isolation. So many of the men, my friends, socially, they're so outmatched in the emotional field, the emotional arena, that to enter it with a spouse just feels like defeat. Just makes them feel as small as they were when they were a child. I think the most important move in this conversation this evening starts by understanding that there's a vacuum when we talk about healthy masculinity. It often gets defined as softer, more like the feminine. But this is a categorical error. It implicitly treats the masculine as a problem to be tempered rather than a generative principle to be integrated. Bly named this in Iron John when he critiqued the soft male of the 1970s, men who had become genuinely more receptive, more emotionally available, more nurturing, and yet seemed so life-deprived, lacking force and ungrounded in a positive masculine identity of their own. As our awareness of the patriarchy and its implications and impact on everyone in society increases, we can make the mistake of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If we fail to understand the masculine principles and characteristics that are part of a whole, integrated, and healthy individual, we lose so much of what it means to be human. One idea that I like to teach about is that both men and women suffer from living in the patriarchy. If this were not the case, then we would not see the disparity between men and women in prison. While many people accurately and importantly observe that minorities, like I said earlier, and people of color are overrepresented in the prison system, the same is true of men in general. 93% of prisoners in America are men. That's a drastic overrepresentation. Men end up being cut off from a part of their life force, their energy. And they and women reject the masculine and thereby lose a certain critical energy that would be helpful for them. Let me describe some foundations for healthy masculinity. I'll talk about deep masculine versus domesticated masculine or savage masculine. Robert Bly's central architecture, the savage or toxic masculine, is unintegrated aggression, reactive, dominating, fear-based. The domesticated is the over-civilized nice man. In the book Women Who Run with Wolves, it talks about getting in touch with the wild woman, right? Getting in touch with the wild woman. This is the wild man. The domesticated is over-civilized, nice man, who has suppressed his vigor and become passive, often resentful underneath. The deep masculine is something else entirely. Grounded, instinctually alive, capable of fierce love, and sovereign in himself. Isn't that powerful to think about it that way? That there's this, I mean, just think about the fact that we don't hear people talk about healthy masculinity. This sense of sovereignty, this boundaried self. This ability to decide from a grounded place what is right for oneself. Moving on. The masculine as a principle, not a gender. I've tried to make this clear, but sometimes even I mix it up. From Carl Jung and going forward, the masculine, or the animus, in a woman, is a psychological function present in all people. A woman embodying the deep masculine is no less feminine. She is whole. A man identified only with the masculine and dissociated from the feminine, his anima, is only half a person, just the same. Healthy masculinity is the integrated expression of a principle, not the performance of a gender. It's not about rules and roles and expectations. It is a certain kind of life energy and life force. It is a passion, and one might say even an erotic force. And by erotic, I don't mean sexual. I mean creative. I mean generative. I mean something that brings something to life, that brings the spirit to life. The wild man is not the savage, just like the wild woman is not the savage. He is embodied. Instinctual masculine that civilization has tried to drown. He has dignity, depth, and capacity for relationship. He is the ally, not the enemy. The golden ball in the story that I told you about must be retrieved from him. The young man's vitality, creativity, and authentic life force are held by the wild man. To get the ball back, the boy must release the wild man from his cage, meaning the modern man must consciously reclaim that which has been repressed in him. The part of him that his mother and father told him was ugly or inappropriate, told him it was a threat. Like I mentioned, the key is stored under the mother's pillow. A man cannot become a man while still operating under the maternal containment of his childhood. He must learn, in this metaphorical sense that my Buddhist friend talked about, he must learn to kill the mother, metaphorically, to let go of the mother's expectations. I often say to the young men that I work with, I explain to them that there's a slogan in Al-Anon that says, what other people think about me is none of my business. And then I double down on that by saying, both to parents and child, what your parents think about you is none of your business. It's not necessarily anything to do with you. And it says much more about them than it does about you. So the wounding is that you have to leave. You have to steal it. There is a necessary conscious differentiation, not a rejection of the mother, but a stepping out from beneath her psychic roof. If she herself is so unconscious, then it will be a rejection of her. So many of the people that are going no contact with their parents are embodying that masculine energy, whether they be female, male, or non-binary. The going no contact is to embody that masculine energy. This is what's right for me. And my experience is they don't do it in cases where there was historical injuries and repair. They do it because every attempt today to have a discussion with mother and or father results in them being outmatched or being told that they are the problem. And this desire to differentiate is hurting or wounding the mother because she is not taking up her own life force. Descent is the path. The grief road is the road of initiation. Robert Bly says it in various forms. There is no shortcut to masculine maturity that bypasses the wound, the loss, the descent into the underworld of one's own pain. And so many men, because of the way that they have been impacted by society, taught by society who they should and shouldn't be, are so averse to this descent. They think of it as silly, not worthwhile, irrelevant, something that only women or weak people do. Not realizing, of course, that it is the courageous going in and looking and finding what's in there and bringing back out the inner child, empowered and embodied to be who he is. Let's talk about healthy femininity for just a moment, in contrast, so that we don't make the mistake that a lot of people make in describing masculinity through the lens of femininity. The first one is receptivity. This is the capacity to take in, to be moved, to be entered by reality without armoring against it. It's not passivity. It's active openness. It's containment, as in holding. Think of the womb. It holds space for what is emerging without forcing it into shape. Rational intelligence. It reads the field. So many women talk about their ability to read a room emotionally, that they're constantly taking the temperature. It knows what's happening between people, right? Women are supported and taught about this kind of energy. They spend a lot of time talking and networking with friends and understanding the dynamics in relationships. Healthy femininity knows what is going on between people. It tracks the unspoken, the intuitive. The woman becomes, or the man becomes, if he's embraced the feminine, the embodiment of this receptivity. It lives in the body, not above it. It knows through the body. Trust the body. This is referencing Marion Woodman's work, her central work on recovering the feminine from the disembodied spirit. The healthy feminine has its own eros and aliveness, the capacity for delight, sensuality, beauty, pleasure without consumption or shame. The world as enchanted, not a resource. The healthy feminine has a certain kind of cyclical knowing. It lives with rhythm, seasons, descents, returns, doesn't demand linear progress. Masculine energy tends to be more linear and kind of task focused. This is cyclical. It's the wisdom of the dark. It knows the underworld. So many times I'm just trying to equip men with language, with vocabulary, with the basic stuff of which women kind of get in their natural upbringing anyway, their conditioning. So that the man has an ability to talk in that world. But for the feminine, they know the underworld. They do not flee from dissent or grief or mystery or the unknown. They are the friend of what cannot be controlled. Again, the wild woman. They are fierce protectors, the mother bear, ferocity in the service of what is being held. They're able to embody mercy. They hold the wounded without contempt. Does not require them to be broken to be whole before being loved. They yield strength. And they demonstrate power through non-resistance. There's an intuitive knowing in the feminine. Knowing without proving. Trust the image, the dream, the felt sense that they have. Of course, they are comfortable in communion and know what it means to be in belonging. They live in the web of relationships that she knows for herself. The healthy masculine is also containment, the capacity to hold tension, contradiction, and another person's pain without collapsing or fixing it. This is similar to what Winnicott talked about when he talked about holding or containing. They have boundaried love. They love fiercely but are able to say no. The two are not opposed, but because the mother wound, which they might not have healed, tells them they can't be boundary, they can't be a separate person if they don't experience that separation, that differentiation from mom, they'll forever be held hostage by that mother wound. And likely it's to be expressed with violence and aggression. As Henry Cloud frames it, boundaries are the structure that makes love possible. They're able to make sacrificial commitment, willing to die, to ego, to comfort, to lesser versions of himself for what he loves. Similar to Campbell's idea of the hero who gives his life so others might live. Sovereignty without dominance, owns his ground, his choices, his no. In Al-Anon, we say no is a complete sentence. And yet so many men that I know find it difficult to say no. Feel tremendous, profound guilt at saying no, or I can't. They don't need to control others to feel secure in themselves. Generative aggression, force directed toward creation, protection, and truth-telling, not toward domination, right? There's always a shadow side to everything, right? The shadow side of this generative aggression is toxic aggression. But this generative aggression is the missing piece in most healthy definitions of masculinity. In fact, it's even foreign for most to think of that aggression itself could be holy, could be sacred. I want to talk about archetypes in the masculine world. Archetype is kind of a pattern, an algorithm, kind of a character that you see in a movie. You say, oh, that's the class clown. That's the hero. That's the scapegoat, right? Those are kind of simple archetypes. But these archetypes talked about in the literature that talks about the masculine. The first one is the king. Generative, ordering, blessing. The mature king speaks life into his domain. His family, his work, his community. King Arthur was a good example. He sees others and confirms their existence. And the shadow side of this king, the tyrant, dominating, jealous of others' light. And the weakling abdicates, will not claim his throne. That was a lot of what Bly saw in the 1970s. The healthy king says, I see you, you are good, and take your place. The second masculine archetype, the warrior, boundaried, disciplined, willing to sacrifice for what matters. Not violent, but capable. The warrior knows what he is fighting for and what he is not. The shadow side of the warrior is the sadist or the masochist. The sadist is cruelty without cause, and the masochist is collapse, no boundary, self-erasing, and self-diminishing. The healthy warrior protects, commits, finishes what he starts, and dies to his lesser self. The magician, knowledge, initiation, mastery, discernment. The one who can read what is hidden, who holds technical and spiritual knowledge, who initiates others. The shadow side of it is the manipulator. Knowledge as power over another person, or the denier, innocent, refuses to know what plays dumb, withholds the gift. The healthy magician serves with what he knows. And the lover, feeling, beauty, eros, embodied connection. The lover is sensual without being predatory, deeply feeling without being engulfed. The shadow side is the addicted lover, lost to sensations, can't say no. And the impotent lover, cut off from feeling. The healthy lover is in the world and alive to it. So the characteristics of a healthy masculine is that they are able to bless, to speak life, to inspire. They can discern one thing from another, and they help to initiate the young. Let me take you with me on this journey. A healthy masculine characteristic is friendship with this going inward that I talk about, this descent. Not running from grief, nor failure, nor shadow, nor the wound. Men have to be taught, Hollis said, not to flee and to face these things. Eros without consumption. They can feel deeply, love sensually, encounter beauty without needing to possess or perform. Vertical orientation, oriented towards something larger than the self, toward God, the work, the lineage, the cause, the next generation. They can see themselves in the greater perspective, the greater, something larger. And then comfort with mystery. The magician's gift doesn't need to flatten the world into manageable answers. Loves to embrace the mystery rather than needing certainty. Across the entire literature, the diagnostic claim is the same. Modern culture has lost the right that turns a boy into a man. And without this type of initiation, boys grow into adult bodies but remain psychologically boys. Traditionally, initiation involved separation from the mother and the world of women, a ritual wounding or trial overseen by others, by the elders, an encounter with mortality, and a return with a new identity, name, or role, a blessing from older men who confirm this new status. Can you imagine that in more primitive cultures, that initiation process that we simply don't have today, that has been stripped down? From Iron John, Robert Blythe talks about this idea that the soft male that he found in the 1970s, excuse me, that these soft men in the 1970s who were lovely, valuable, but lacked vitality, life. They were preserving, but not life-giving. And always where a man's wound is, there will be his genius. And that's true of all of us. Bly repeatedly frames the descent into grief as the doorway to the masculine depth. The road down is the road in. And since men are cut off from the guides that might help them with this descent, so many of them are stuck, not knowing, and then acting out a kind of toxic masculinity as some approximation for what they really need and really want. James Hollis explains the secret wounds that men carry. The wound of the absent father. This is the wound of inadequacy, that I must not be enough for Father to love me. And the wound of the unlived life. Hollis argues that most men's lives are organized around fleeing their wounds rather than facing them. Sometimes fighting them, I would argue. We seldom give sufficient weight to what courses within. Thinking, perhaps, that we do not know what will not hurt, what we do not know will not hurt us. This is worth repeating. What we do not know controls us. Toxic masculinity is not too much masculinity. It is uninitiated masculinity. It is what happens when the deep masculine has been neither developed nor integrated, leaving a man or anyone embodying the masculine principle operating at a child's psychological level, reactive, performative, fragile, needing dominance to feel safe. Healthy masculinity, then, is not the absence of force. It is force in the service of love. It is the king who blesses, the warrior who protects, the magician who initiates, and the lover who is fully present. It is, according to Robert Bly, the wild man retrieved from the bottom of the pond, not killed, not caged, but befriended and walked with into the world. So I think what I want to say is, I think it's important to take a pause about our ideas of men and women and masculinity and femininity in all of us. Anytime that you create a story where there's a bad guy and a good guy, you're back at the beginning again. And try again. All of the traits of masculinity have their shadow side, and all of them have their light or their gift side. And yet we do so little to talk about these things. When women exhibited masculine traits, they're often punished and called names. But the same is true for men. They are met with feelings of guilt and shame because of how what their being might hurt other people. They're encouraged to be more related and more empathic, but in some ways they're disempowered. So the conclusions, the take-homes are: a healthy psyche is comprised of an integrated masculine and feminine, and that goes no matter what your gender. Failure to integrate those parts will end in some kind of pathology. Men's lives are often governed by women's expectations, by the culture's expectations. We are very clear at times about what the patriarchy and the culture does to women, but we don't spend as much time and attention talking about how the patriarchy also cuts men off from their life force, from powerful and important parts of themselves. Toxic masculinity is the result of a lack of the integration of these masculine principles. Men wear their armor because they have learned that vulnerability is weak and ugly. And we will never understand the secret life of men until we understand their plight through the lens of compassion and non-judgment. Men's internal lives are often hidden from themselves and from the world. That old saying that the people who need our support most are oftentimes the ones that we find it most difficult to give to them, I think that's true of men. I was going to post this quote from Mark Twain that I really love. I came across it again this week. I've shared it several times in the years past. And it's a quote by Mark Twain that you can look up. And he said, "Who in modern civilization has had the heart to pray for Satan?" It's kind of a funny thought, isn't it? He said, if anybody needs our prayers, wouldn't it be Satan? But who ever thinks about praying for Satan? And in a way, I wanted to translate that to men. Men are in prison not necessarily because we're just throwing them in there for no reason. They're in prison because of the harm that they're doing to children and women and other men. But the point of the overrepresentation of prisoners is not that they're like it is with people of color, where the system is biased against them, and so they're overrepresented because they're not guilty. But it is because they are guilty. It is because their emotional worlds have been cut off. Because they're ill-equipped to talk about a feeling. They're ill-equipped to talk about their insecurities. their anxieties, their sense of inadequacy. The admission of those things is dangerous for them. So like Mark Twain's funny, tongue-in-cheek, but really serious quote about praying for Satan, we can have compassion for the monsters that men become when they're cut off from their inner world. And as with all battles we have with all monsters, it's important that we not become the monster ourselves. And so just talking about how horrible they are and the damage they do doesn't necessarily help them in their healing. We have to understand. We have to see the world through their eyes. Know what's at stake when they're asked to come to therapy. We will never understand the secret life of men until we understand their plight with compassion and non-judgment. Men's internal lives are often hidden from themselves and from the world. Therapy itself presents a threat to this effort to camouflage their needs. If you can meet a man and have compassion for his wounds, you may never be able to help him. If you can meet a man and have compassion for his wounds, you may be able to help him and to encourage him to take the descent and discover who he is. Like I mentioned, my work in dealing with men and women is that once men hear and feel the compassion in psychotherapy and that it's not all their fault and that they aren't acting in by themselves in all of this, that some of the wounds that they are acting out on others, they came by honestly. Once you start to show that kind of compassion toward the men in therapy, once you empower them to own their feelings, to teach them how to fight in a healthy way with their spouses, then you can help men and women and children all at the same time. All right, folks. I hope that's a helpful introduction. If you want to read Robert Bly's book, Iron John, or James Hollis's book, Under Saturn's Shadow, I would strongly recommend both. I personally like Iron John a little bit more than Under Saturn's Shadow, so if you're looking for a recommendation, I like both, but I'd start with Iron John. All right, if you're not aware, our Finding You Inner Circle has launched. If you are an alumni, you're automatically enrolled. If not, you can attend and have a subscription for the podcast and attend these live. You also get a couple of hours of content a month that everybody else doesn't get. My 3 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, The Audacity to Be You, and the new book, Stay in the Room, that I co-authored, are available on Amazon and Audible, wherever books are sold. If you want to join me for a week-long workshop in New York, I'll be there July 12th through 17th with my daughter Emma at the Omega Institute. Go to eomega.org, click on the workshops tab, and sign up for the Audacity to Be You workshop in July. I will be in North Carolina at the Art of Living Retreat Center teaching that same class with my daughter, September 27th through October 2nd. I am going to be running the June 10th through 14th workshop. That will fill up. It's already actually getting a lot of traction. So if you're interested, sign up sooner rather than later. That's June 10th through 14th. I'll be running the Finding You. For all other inquiries, feedback, questions, if you're looking for a private intensive for a couple or a family, if you want to attend our support group, if you're an alumni, which is on the 3rd Wednesday of each month, or if you're looking for a coach or a therapist who can help you in this work, go to our website portal or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. I'll be back Thursday night for a live Ask Me Anything for our Inner Circle audience. So if you're listening to this, you can submit a question and you can listen to the answer later through the podcast, through the private podcast, just for our Inner Circle audience. So that's this Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Ask Me Anything. Thanks for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you. And on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up and doing your work, because you doing all your work, you taking the descent into yourself makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.